This year, Susan Candiotti marks 39 years in television broadcast journalism. She just wrapped up the last 21 of those years for CNN as a national correspondent assigned to the New York Bureau. Her breaking news and investigative assignments have taken her across the U.S., Canada, Central and South America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. She spent a year studying at Loyola University's Rome Center. Because of her education and as a journalist, Susan Candiotti is an adamant supporter of language education. Throughout her travels, she's covered numerous high-profile news stories, interviewing people facing hardship and tragedy, as well as politicians, government leaders, and internationally recognized personalities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Susan Candiotti.
Hi, Jacque.
Susan, welcome to the ACTFL convention. We're thrilled to have you here to engage our audience this morning in some conversations from around the world.
Well, thanks, Jackie. It's really an honor to be here to support what you and your colleagues do on a daily basis in the language classroom.
I know you've been an advocate for language learning for many years.
I sure have. In fact, my sister, Mimi Hagedorn, who's in this room today, right up front, she is a language educator, so this issue is very close to my heart. My travel as a CNN correspondent, both domestically and internationally, is again further proof of how essential it is to have some proficiency in another language. Otherwise, you're really limiting yourself as to how well you can do your job, and I believe also in everyday life.
You could have been a different country every week.
Oh, that's for sure. And for that reason, I'm a big supporter of language education at every level, and the earlier, the better. And it's becoming more important every year.
I couldn't agree more. Our convention serves as a support network for language educators from around the world. And it's a place where we can come together to learn about the latest tools, techniques, and resources. We also want to inspire our learners and remind everyone of what a huge impact all of us has on our students and really on the world.
Exactly. And I firmly believe language education can change the world. And Jackie, you used the word network. It really is all about the power of connectivity. The world we live in today is so well connected, thanks in part to Skype, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, making it so much easier to engage with people all over the globe.
That's one of the things we're always saying. It begins with important fundamentals in the classroom, but don't leave it there. Take it with you. Get connected. Use the power of connectivity for those important intercultural experiences. They give you the nuances of a language and context and allow you to transform yourself and your students to develop higher levels of proficiency.
And Jackie, as you know, just before this convention, we reached out to several business professionals around the world. Each one knows firsthand that knowledge of another language can make a difference. For starters, we asked our international panel why they think learning other languages is important. Let's see what they had to say.
It's almost impossible to go through your day without interacting with something from another country or another culture. And it's really important now for us to be appreciative of all these other countries who have so much to contribute to our lives, even in the United States.
Words is just a small part of what is a much bigger and more exciting opportunity, and that's exactly what learning a language opens your eyes to and opens your mind to in some cases too.
I love being multilingual because it gives me a sense of flexibility. If I'm not interested in listening to music in English, then I can go listen to music in Arabic, and it's a totally different sound. I can communicate with 3 times as many people and have access to 3 times as many ideas.
Susan, you know, we've never been more globally connected than we are today.
That's right, absolutely. And you can, as you know, tweet and text and email and send your messages that people will get instantly almost anywhere in the world.
Why then, with this unlimited worldwide connectivity, would we limit ourselves to interacting with people who only speak our language?
That's true. And it prompted us to pose this question to our international panel. How do you connect with global colleagues? And here's how they responded.
I connect global colleagues through emails, and phone calls.
Through instant message, email, Skype, phone calls.
Besides using Skype and email, I also use Facebook.
So mostly I use email and telephone communications, although we do sometimes have digital video conferences and webinars.
Phone or by a video connection like Skype.
I connect through global calling by email, 90% of it, most likely.
We do connect via digital, most of it, via web.
It is Skype and FaceTime, and also by emails and other social media.
Exactly. As we've heard, online connections across platforms are definitely the preferred method of staying in touch and communicating with those in other countries, other time zones, and other languages.
And that leads us to our next follow-up. Can you think of an example when your ability to speak another language helped you solve a problem? And here's how our business professionals weighed in on that.
While I was managing federally funded grants in Senegal, I used my French to email, make phone calls, work with budgets, and to work with legal documents.
I was working on a consulting project in Jordan where my boss could not speak the local language Arabic. So it was my job as the fixer and the interpreter to go out into the field and speak with clients to make sure that the end product was actually working for them.
We do business with a lot of German companies, and they're used to doing business in German and in a German way, and being able to cross that cultural divide by speaking their language, it resolves a lot of issues and it makes the conversation much simpler. What I find is that by opening up to people in the language that they speak, things get resolved much more easily. You're quite literally, obviously, talking the same language, but in more than one way.
So as you can see, being able to communicate in the primary language wherever you are can be a big problem solver. What a relief to have someone on your team who's able to step forward and be that voice of connectivity.
Oh, translators help me all the time, Jackie. And we were also talking earlier about how important it was in my job to be able to communicate wherever a story might take me. Given the international reach of most organizations these days, language proficiency is a benefit in almost any job.
Oh, of course it is, and it helps us to recognize and target the language demands in today's market. If we can get a clear vision of how exactly proficient our learners need to be, then we can set our targets to get them there.
So, here's another question we wanted to explore. How proficient in another language do you need to be to make a difference on the job, even at the entry level? Here's what our panel thinks.
I think you have to be very proficient in a language if you want to use it in a professional setting. You're always really competing with your colleagues in terms of languages, because if someone knows a language better than you, they're going to be given the work over you.
You need to learn some basic stuff, basic communication skills, and from them you can build the rest on the way, I would say.
Being in a very technical field, I need to be very proficient in the language, not only be able to speak and communicate it, but also to write and read technical documents.
The Foreign Service really does prepare you to speak in a very professional manner with your overseas colleagues.
Susan, this one was interesting to me because most people would expect the typical response to be a recommendation for advanced proficiency. But more than one person suggested you don't necessarily have to be fluent, which is actually, I think, an encouraging message for our students as they engage in learning a language. Don't be intimidated. Get started. Celebrate what you can do with language. And the more you try to use it, the more proficient you get.
And you know, we also have to recognize that even if you speak a different language, or more than one, you're still going to encounter languages that you don't speak. So here's what we asked our experts. When you travel to a country where you don't speak the language, how do you prepare for the work that you need to do while you're there? Here's how they answered that one.
Being the language nerd that I am, I use it as an excuse to study the basic vocab.
So it helps me to read newspaper articles in that foreign language on the plane, for example, on the train.
Most people will probably speak some English, but nonetheless, I do try to prepare by learning a few words and phrases in the local language so that I can show that I'm making an effort to understand them, just they're making a big effort to understand me.
I would learn few words of good mornings and hellos and things that might break the ice, at least communicated from human levels.
We're provided with intensive language training when we're sent to what we call language designated posts. My local colleagues here are incredibly helpful in providing a few little phrases or a few, just cultural notes that are really helpful when you get out in the field.
Those are all good suggestions. And I think we could summarize them with one word: preparation. If you're traveling to another country, you know where you're going. Why not investigate the language and make things easier on yourself when you get there?
Well, it makes sense for everyone, including journalists, to break down the language barrier. And as our panelists point out, it's something that we all have to overcome from time to time. I mean, we all agree that language education is important, but of course, you can't learn every language.
Right, so you have to plan ahead and create strategies for communication challenges before you encounter them.
And Jackie, we've been hearing a lot of examples about language proficiency helping in personal or professional situations.
There are also many examples of when a lack of proficiency creates a real barrier, but not how you might think.
So we asked our panel this: can you share with us a funny story that happened while you were doing business, thanks to a language mix-up? Let's call this one Lost in Translation. Listen.
I went to dinner with a client once in Egypt and tried to order a plate of falafel for them. Only the problem is that in Egyptian Arabic, the word for falafel is ta'ameya, and in a loud restaurant, I think that sounded like hammam to the waiter, which means pigeon. So the waiter looked at me and said, "Do you want one or two?" And I said, two plates of falafel. 30 minutes later, he comes back with all the food, lays it all out, and there's no falafel, but he has brought us 2 stuffed pigeons.
Growing up in East African Somalia, we didn't have snow or ice, and there was no description, there's no differentiation between the two of them. So when I first came to the States and I wanted to order a meal from cafeteria, I wanted to get less ice or no ice at all. So I requested not to have a snow on my Coke.
In one instance, I wanted to express my gratitude, and I wanted to simply say, "Thank you so much, you're a saint." And instead, I said, "Thank you so much, you're pregnant," because the words for saint and pregnant sound alike.
Those are all fun, but all too familiar. I bet everybody in this room has a memorable story that grew out of a language disconnect. Look, it's clear to all of us that language education is incredibly valuable. I think we can all agree on that. It makes what you do in the classroom, in the school district, at the university, and in state and federal government so important.
Exactly. And right after everything we learned this morning, I think what's obvious is this: however relevant language proficiency might be today, it will be even more important as it gets easier and easier to connect with each other.
As language educators, we have a responsibility to prepare our students, not only for employment, but really for their lives after schooling. So as we go back to the classrooms after the convention, I'd like to challenge you to ask yourself, how are you using the power of connectivity to create opportunities so that both you and your students can improve your language proficiency and intercultural competencies?
That is an excellent point. For example, keep inviting native speakers to your classroom, in person or by Skype, for example. You know, when CNN can't get a newsmaker or an eyewitness to a live location, Skype is one of the fastest ways to get them on TV. And it's also a great way to connect students to the outside world.
Or participating in online chats, or reading international blogs, or exercising your language muscles by emailing or tweeting or texting in more than one language. Ask yourself this: what opportunities are your students being given to develop their intercultural skills and reflect on what they've learned? Think about when you were a student and try to remember the moment when you thought, hey, learning this language could really be useful for me, for my job, for my career, for what I do in life.
And then try to remember what helped you make that connection and find ways to inspire your students. My sister, for example, used a video conference to join students in Dijon, France, with her class in Kentucky while she was setting up a student exchange. Well, that gave students on both sides of the ocean something to remember long before they even met, and it got news coverage. Today, teachers are even, oh yeah, that's all about getting the word out. It's free publicity for you guys, right? Today, teachers are even having their students collaborate on common projects with their peers in partner schools. So teachers, as we know, really make a difference. And now we'd like to give our international panel the final word on how language teachers inspired them.
I think the teachers that helped me, where I learn multiple languages, is what helped me not only advance as a human being, but also be able to live different parts of the world.
And when I was 16, I didn't know how to use them and why I learned it. But once I was in the field and doing business, the last 20 years, it helped me. It helped me a lot.
I can definitely say that I would not be here today if it weren't for all of the great language teachers that I've had over the past 15 years of my education, starting with my 5th grade French teacher who was really inspirational.
Down the road, when we have children, we plan to have a system where our children get exposure to English at school. They will only be allowed to communicate with me in French at home. My wife, they will only be allowed to communicate with her in Spanish.
Thank you to all of you for opening my eyes, not just to new languages and new words, but quite literally to a world of opportunities. Thank you so much.
You don't realize how important your teacher is until you get into the situation where you need to use that language and you recall all the things that your teacher has taught you and the way that they've inspired you to dig further into different vocabulary and to learn more about the culture. So thank you all for what you do.
You know, that kind of chokes me up because I do know Ashley personally. Her mother is a French professor, friend of mine, and Ashley accompanied me to Versailles, France to help with a group of elementary students. So it's particularly exciting to see where her career has gone and how she uses languages, but the same for all of them. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspectives on language education as a vital element for our job skills in the global marketplace.
Well, thank you, Jackie, and I'm really honored to be here today, and I hope we'll see many of you on our panel at 3:45 this afternoon.
We hope we've given you something to think about today, ways you can engage your students when you return to your classroom after the convention. Over the next few days, we hope you'll take advantage of all that the ACTFL convention has to offer. And now, let's meet our keynote speaker,